There are phrases we say without thinking, greetings that come out of our mouths like reflexes, and answers that simply echo what everyone else says. But when you stop and really look, you realize that often words don't connect. They just fill the silence. In a world where everyone talks but few truly listen, what's truly captivating isn't what is said, but where it's coming from. That's why the key isn't to greet like everyone else, but to use words that awaken something, that strike a chord. Behind a simple, "Hey, how are you?" may lie the reason so many conversations die before they even begin. Many people feel that words no longer suffice, that connections have grown cold or forced. You approach someone, and it all sounds the same. Empty phrases, learned courtesies, polite enthusiasm. And yet, there's another way of speaking, one that doesn't aim to please, but to understand. The Stoics said that language should serve virtue, not vanity. Speaking with presence is both an act of respect and attraction. When your words come from calm, clarity, and intention, they become magnetic. In this video, you'll discover 7 words or phrases that can transform how you relate to others, and most importantly, to yourself. If this is your first time here, my name is Gabriel. I share ideas from Stoicism applied to everyday life, especially for those seeking serenity and more genuine connections in adulthood. I invite you to stay until the end, because the last word may be the most powerful of all, the one that not only attracts, but also brings peace. Let's begin. Some encounters start politely and end in silence. 2 people greet each other, smile, and then don't know what to say. It's such a common pattern that most people don't even notice it. We greet out of habit, not presence. The usual, "Hi, how are you?" has become an automatic exchange, a worn-out key that no longer opens any doors. But if instead you chose a different word, a phrase that sparks curiosity, the effect would be immediate. Saying, "Tell me what you've been up to," or "It's great to see you today," carries a different energy. It shows attention, not routine. The first powerful word, then, is exactly that, one that breaks the ice with authenticity, not protocol. When someone opens with genuine curiosity, they create connection. It's not just what they say, but how they say it, with pause, eye contact, and presence. We've already seen that words can either drain or connect, and here's the first key point. Language doesn't begin in the mouth, but in the mind. If your intention is to know, to listen, or to share, your tone changes, and the other person feels it. Epictetus said that to speak little but with purpose is a sign of emotional intelligence. Speaking with purpose doesn't mean speaking a lot, it means saying just enough, consciously. Picture the scene. You're at a cafe and spot someone you know. Instead of the usual greeting, you smile and say, "What a nice surprise to run into you today." It's a simple phrase, but it feels alive. The other person feels seen, not just politely acknowledged. The same thing happens in any relationship, with your kids, friends, or even a stranger. Living words open the door to real conversation, dead words merely repeat an empty ritual. I remember one afternoon when, without planning it, I greeted a neighbor differently. "You look different today. Calmer, maybe." She stopped, looked at me, and smiled. Then she told me she'd just quit a stressful job. That conscious opening line changed the entire tone of the moment. I realized that sometimes all it takes is naming what you notice with care for someone to feel that they matter. Stoicism teaches that virtue begins with perception. When you observe without rushing, your words come out cleaner. It's not about manipulating, it's about connecting truthfully. Ask yourself, how often do you speak without really being there? How often do you greet without truly looking? When a greeting comes from awareness, it stops being a social formula and becomes an act of presence. Breaking the ice with authenticity doesn't mean talking more. It means talking better. Saying something sincere, noticing what the other person conveys, and responding to that. It's a practice of attention, a way to train the soul in daily life. Marcus Aurelius wrote that attention is the soul on guard. Speaking from that place transforms even the simplest hello into an opportunity for connection. That's where the power of words that attract begins, not in seeking approval, but connection. And when you achieve that, when the other person feels truly seen and heard, the conversation flows naturally. From there, communication stops being a social act and becomes an act of presence. With that said, let's move on to the next lesson, because behind an authentic greeting lies something even deeper: the ability to validate others without losing your inner calm. There's an invisible force that sustains the deepest relationships: validation. It's not about agreeing with everything, but about acknowledging what the other person feels without judging it. That's the second powerful word, the one that says, "I understand," instead of "you're wrong." It's a simple phrase, but it has a transformative effect. When someone feels that their emotions are seen, they stop defending themselves. But when we deny or correct them, they shut down. Validation is a form of respect, and respect in Stoic philosophy is the virtue of a calm soul. When someone is upset, they're not looking for advice. They're looking for someone to understand why they feel that way. So far, we've learned that authentic connection begins with a living word. Now we take it a step further, recognizing another person's inner world without carrying it. To validate isn't to absorb, it's to look with understanding and boundaries. You can say, "I can see that hurt you," or "sounds like it's been a rough day," and suddenly the other person relaxes. You're not fixing anything, you're simply acknowledging what is. It's a quiet act of empathy, not rescue. I remember a conversation with my adult son, one of those that start tense and end in uncomfortable silence. He was talking with frustration about a decision I couldn't quite understand. Before, I would have responded with arguments, but that day, I just took a breath and said, "I understand that it hurt you. It wasn't my intention." The energy shifted. There was no winner or loser, just two people who stopped competing. Validation doesn't mean surrender, it means seeing the other person without losing yourself. In Stoicism, this attitude is called temperance, the ability to stay balanced even when others' emotions run high. Epictetus taught that it's not things themselves that disturb us, but the opinions we have about them. When you validate, you suspend judgment and make room for understanding. It's a gesture of wisdom. You don't try to change how the other person feels. You walk beside them in their humanity. So often, the lack of validation destroys connections that could have grown. When someone doesn't feel heard, they drift away. When they feel seen, they stay. It's that simple. Validation is a way of saying, "I recognize you," and that draws people in more powerfully than any charm or strategy, because all of us, even the strongest, need to feel that our experience matters. Practicing validation doesn't mean allowing everything. On the contrary, when you listen calmly and acknowledge the other, you can set boundaries without harshness. Saying, "I understand how you see it, but I can't go along with that," preserves both dignity and respect. It's the mature way to hold on to peace without closing your heart. Validation is compassionate firmness, not weakness. The word that validates doesn't seek to be right, it seeks to stay connected. When someone feels seen, they no longer need to shout. That's why every time you use this word, you're strengthening one of the soul's hardest virtues, empathy with boundaries. And behind that understanding lies something even deeper, a doorway to true openness. Because once you've validated, the next step is allowing the other person to see you too. Some conversations feel like an emotional tennis match. One person speaks, the other replies with empty phrases that just bounce the ball back. But there are words that completely change that dynamic. The third powerful word is the one that opens, the word that doesn't aim to impose or conclude, but to invite. A simple phrase like, "How do you see it?" or "What made you think that?" transforms the exchange because it gives the other person space to reveal themselves. Instead of a trade of monologues, a dialogue emerges. To open isn't to ask out of idle curiosity, but from genuine interest, and that difference is palpable. So far, we've learned that the first step is to speak with authenticity, and the second, to validate calmly. This third step takes us deeper, to create openness. In Stoic language, to open is to practice humility, to accept that the other person has something to teach you, even if you don't share their view. When you ask a question with purpose, you're not losing control, you're gaining perspective. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "No man learns what he already thinks he knows." That phrase captures the essence of the word that opens. I remember a walk where I passed an elderly man sitting on a bench. He looked upset, so out of politeness I asked if he was all right. He replied wearily, "Things just aren't like they used to be." At another time, I might have changed the subject, but that day I said, "What do you miss most about before?" He looked at me, took a breath, and began to talk about his late wife, his neighborhood, his youth. He wasn't seeking advice, just to be heard. That simple question freed him. I learned that when we open with genuine interest, the other person feels safe enough to be themselves. Stoicism teaches that the wise person doesn't fear what they don't know, because the unknown is part of nature. When you ask with openness, you're practicing that wisdom. You're acknowledging that life exists beyond your opinions. Questions that open are like seeds. Some bloom right away, others much later, but all of them plant trust. The attraction that comes from that kind of openness isn't superficial. It's the kind that grows from being fully present and calmly responsive. It's important to distinguish between opening and intruding. To open is to accompany. To intrude is to invade. An open question doesn't aim to gather information. It offers space. You can say, "What made you reflect on that?" Or, "What would you like to happen now?" With those words, you remind the other person that they can think and feel without being judged. In maturity, this kind of communication not only strengthens relationships, it lightens the soul. Opening a conversation takes courage because it means letting go of control. Not everything you hear will be comfortable, but serenity doesn't come from control. It comes from acceptance. That kind of openness creates genuine attraction. People are drawn to those who don't squeeze them with judgment, but invite them to expand. And the curious thing is, the more space you give, the more respect you earn. So next time you feel a conversation fading, instead of changing the subject or explaining your point, open a door. Ask something that lets the other person breathe. Human connection isn't born from charm. It comes from emotional openness that conveys safety. And speaking of safety, there's another word that lifts the energy of any encounter, one that inspires without sounding forced and reveals the best in you without seeking recognition. If this message resonates with you, I invite you to subscribe to the channel, give it a like, and share your name and country in the comments. I love knowing where you're listening from, and I read them all. If you'd like to add to this list, leave your suggestion for another word that you believe sparks genuine connection. It might appear in a future video. That said, let's continue, because beyond opening lies something greater: the ability to elevate a conversation so that it inspires and leaves a lasting mark on the other person's spirit. There are words that don't just open, they lift the spirit of whoever hears them. These are the phrases that brighten a moment without exaggeration, that inspire without flattery. The fourth powerful word is the one that lifts. It can be something like, "I'm glad to hear you talk that way," or "I really admire how you see things." It's not empty praise. It's conscious recognition. In a time when many expect to be criticized, a word that lifts acts like a balm. It's not about sugarcoating, it's about reminding the other person of their own worth. And when you do that, the connection stops being fragile. It becomes nourishing. With that in mind, we arrive at an essential point in Stoic communication. Say things that build, not that destroy. To lift doesn't mean ignoring what's difficult. It means showing that even in the middle of difficulty, there's something worth appreciating. Seneca said, "He who praises what is good multiplies it." In that phrase lies a practical lesson. When you acknowledge what's valuable in someone else, you help them see it too. And that doesn't make you weak. It makes you magnetic. People are drawn to those who make them feel seen in their light, not under criticism. I remember a conversation with a friend who felt discouraged after a family argument. She told me she felt guilty for setting a boundary. I said, "I think it's admirable that you respect yourself, even when it's hard." She paused for a few seconds and replied, "No one's ever told me that." In that moment, I understood that to lift with words isn't to give advice, it's to offer perspective. Sometimes a single, well-placed phrase is enough to rekindle self-esteem in someone who's lost it. Lifting requires attention. You can't say something uplifting if you're distracted or forcing it. The word that lifts is born from noticing with sensitivity what the other person can't yet see in themselves. It's a generous gaze, not a naive one. In practice, it means speaking from gratitude, noticing what's good and expressing it without fear of sounding sentimental. We often think that recognizing something positive diminishes our authority, but the opposite is true. Real authority comes from calmness and the ability to see the good even in the midst of shadow. Stoicism teaches that the highest virtue is wisdom, and part of that wisdom is recognizing that every human being is both imperfect and valuable. The word that lifts holds those two truths together. It highlights worth without denying imperfection. It's a way of saying, "I see your effort," instead of, "You should do better." That shift in perspective transforms relationships. When you speak that way, you inspire respect and serenity because your words carry balance. Lifting also has to do with yourself. You can't lift someone else if you're speaking from bitterness or complaint. That's why, before recognizing something in others, learn to acknowledge your own progress, no matter how small. Inner gratitude makes you more aware of what you can offer through your words. What comes from a serene mind carries more weight. And when you speak from that place, your words don't just attract, they heal. So when you feel a conversation fading, or when someone seems lost in their anger, choose a word that lifts. Not to avoid conflict, but to remind them that even amid the noise, there's still light. That's the quietest way to transform a relationship. And behind that light lies something even deeper. The peace that takes root when we learn to stay silent at the right time and speak only what's necessary. There are moments when nothing more needs to be said. When emotions are at their peak, when anything you say could come out wrong, true wisdom lies not in speaking, but in offering calm. The fifth powerful word isn't always an actual word. It can be an "I understand" spoken with serenity, or a simple "I'm here" that conveys presence. It's the word that brings peace, the one that doesn't aim to have the last word, but to close the circle without wounding. In times when everyone wants to speak their mind, real magnetism belongs to the one who knows when to stay silent and when to speak with balance. We've already seen that lifting others is a form of wisdom, but peace requires another kind of strength, the strength to contain. Stoicism calls this temperance, the virtue of not letting emotions drag your language along with them. Marcus Aurelius said, "He who controls his words controls his destiny." The word that brings peace isn't cold. It's steady and composed. It doesn't avoid conflict. It moves through it with composure. Saying, "We can talk about this later," or "I don't want to argue, I want to understand you," isn't weakness. It's emotional strength expressed with grace. I remember a vivid scene. A friend told me that during an argument with his daughter, she shouted something hurtful. He felt the urge to snap back, but instead, he took a breath and simply said, "I'm not going to argue with you right now, but I still love you." Days later, she came back and thanked him for not fueling the conflict. That simple phrase was the word that brought peace, not because it avoided the conversation, but because it postponed it until they could both speak with calmer hearts. That kind of restraint isn't learned from books, it's trained in inner silence. In daily life, the word that brings peace has a physical presence. You can feel it in the tone of voice, in the eyes, in the rhythm of breathing. It's less about what's said and more about what's conveyed. Sometimes it's enough to say, "I understand," and stay quiet. Other times, a small smile and a change of subject do the job. It's a way of reminding the other person that you're not their enemy. And paradoxically, that draws people closer than any clever argument, because calm is magnetic. The Stoic doesn't seek to win, they seek to preserve their peace. And when someone radiates calm, others can feel it. There's an energy and balance that inspires trust. A person who masters their words has nothing to prove. By contrast, someone who argues to dominate loses authority, even if they're right. That's why practicing the word that brings peace is also an act of self-respect. You choose to protect your energy rather than feed a pointless conflict. At its core, the word that brings peace teaches something deeper. Not everything requires an immediate response. You can choose not to react and still remain strong. Refusing to answer aggression with aggression doesn't take your power away, it gives it back to you. Serene silence isn't emptiness, it's space for the soul to breathe, and from that pause comes the clarity needed for the next virtue. Because behind calm, there is no passivity. There are roots, and someone who is rooted doesn't sway with the winds of conflict or the praise of others. That's why, once you've found peace in your words, the next natural step is to learn to speak from your center, from that inner root that gives you both identity and strength. After understanding peace comes the moment to sustain it. The sixth powerful word is the one that grounds, the one that affirms who you are without imposing it. It's the phrase that says, "This is what I think," or "I don't accept that," spoken without harshness but with conviction. In a world where many stay silent out of fear or shout to be heard, speaking from your roots is an act of balance. It's a word that is steady, calm, and genuine. It doesn't aim to please, it aims to be consistent. When you speak from your center, your presence becomes stable, and that draws others in far more than any superficial charm. So far, we've explored the power of language that connects, validates, opens, uplifts, and brings peace. But without roots, all of that can be blown away by the first gust of wind. Stoicism puts it plainly: nothing that doesn't come from virtue can last. To root your words is to act from your principles, not from passing emotions. It means responding calmly, even under pressure, keeping your tone steady when others lose theirs. It's a practice of integrity. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The tree does not fear the wind because its roots are deep." The same is true of the words of someone who knows who they are. Think of a conversation where someone tries to manipulate you, pressure you, or make you feel guilty. In those moments, the word that grounds you might be as simple as "no." Or perhaps, "I don't think that's fair," "I'm not available for that," or "I hear you, but I don't agree." Short, direct phrases, without resentment. You don't need to explain your decision over and over. It's enough to hold it calmly. When you do, the other person senses your clarity and stops pushing. Rooting your words means planting boundaries without building walls. I remember a woman who wrote to tell me that her adult son would only call to ask for favors, and he'd get angry whenever she said no. I suggested something simple, that she respond calmly, without excuses, with a firm phrase, "I can't this time, but I trust you'll figure it out." At first she felt guilty, but later she told me that one sentence had changed their relationship. Her son began to treat her with more respect. That was her grounded word, short but powerful. The Stoic doesn't seek to dominate, but to be self-possessed. And that's the essence of the word that grounds. You don't need to persuade, you just need to stay centered. Speaking from your roots doesn't mean being rigid, it means not being swept away. Sometimes the most compassionate thing you can say is no, because a sincere no sustains healthier relationships than a resentful yes. That coherence is palpable, and even if the other person doesn't say it, they respect it. When you speak from your roots, the tone of your language changes. You stop speaking to win and start speaking to care. Your words become slower, more precise, more aligned with who you are. That coherence is magnetic. People trust those who show up whole, without pretense. It's like a tree that gives shade because it's not afraid to be a tree. Speaking from that place reminds you that you don't need to please to connect. You just need to be true. And once your words grow from that inner root, they're no longer carried away by the wind or by others' expectations. Then something beautiful happens. You can end a conversation with serenity, leaving a mark that doesn't depend on the outcome, but on the quality of how you expressed yourself. Behind that steady root lies the final word in this journey, the one that leaves a mark, the one that gathers everything learned and transforms the way you say goodbye to the world. Every conversation comes to an end, but not all of them leave a mark. Some end in awkward silence, others with a sharp remark or a forced goodbye. Yet there are words that linger long after they've been spoken. The seventh powerful word is the one that leaves a mark, a closing phrase that conveys respect, gratitude, or wisdom, even if the exchange was brief or difficult. It's not about saying something clever, but about ending with awareness. Because those who know how to end well know how to live in peace. Up to this point, we've learned that speaking from your roots gives you strength. But to leave a mark, you need tenderness. Inner strength isn't shown only in how you set boundaries, but in how you say goodbye. Stoicism teaches that every encounter could be the last, and therefore deserves to be treated with dignity. Saying, "I wish you the best, thank you for sharing that," or even a sincere "take care," can shift the emotional tone of an entire relationship. Leaving a mark is consciously choosing the final impression you want the other person to carry. I remember a teacher who, whenever someone left upset, never argued. He would simply say, "When you see it differently, I'll be here." That phrase, spoken calmly, would hang in the air like a quiet promise. It didn't close the connection, it kept it open through peace. Over time, I understood that leaving a mark isn't about being right, it's about leaving the other person better than you found them. Your final words are like seeds. You don't know when they'll take root, but if spoken with serenity, they eventually bloom. In daily life, practicing this word means taking care of your endings. Don't end a conversation abruptly or run away from the emotions that surface. You can acknowledge what was shared with a brief phrase that conveys understanding or gratitude. Even a simple "thank you for talking with me" can heal more than you imagine. Sometimes the other person doesn't need to change. Sometimes it's enough for you to speak from peace so that something within both of you can realign. That's the mark of conscious language. It doesn't impose, it echoes. The Stoics said that the soul is measured by what it leaves behind when it departs. Your final words are an extension of your character. If you can close with respect, even when the other doesn't, you're practicing one of the highest forms of virtue. It's not about being perfect, it's about being present until the very last moment of a connection, without resentment, without pride. That presence is what people remember, beyond disagreements or distance. And when you learn to end this way, you change too. Because every time you choose a word that leaves a mark, you remind yourself who you are and what kind of energy you want to leave in the world. You no longer speak out of impulse, you speak out of awareness. You don't aim to convince, you aim to honor. And that coherence is the deepest mark a mature, serene, and free person can leave behind. Thus ends the journey through the 7 words that transform the way we attract and connect, not through seduction or manipulation, but through dignity, empathy, and temperance. And though we reach the end of this reflection, there is still one final pause, a moment to look back and understand what all these words have truly left within us. Looking back, we can see that each word was a step toward more conscious communication. The first taught us to break the ice with authenticity, the second, to validate without losing our calm, the third, to create space for others, the fourth, to uplift with gratitude, the fifth, to bring peace amid conflict, the sixth, to stay grounded with firmness, and the seventh, to leave a mark with dignity. Together, they form a map, a way of speaking that reflects inner serenity and emotional maturity. They're not just phrases, but small daily practices of wisdom that transform how we relate to the world. Thank you for making it this far, for joining this reflection, and for allowing yourself to listen with an open heart. This space exists because of people like you, people willing to grow through calmness and to find in ancient philosophy tools for modern life. Every comment, every message, and every minute you spend being present makes it possible to continue sharing this journey of growth and shared serenity. Knowing that there's someone on the other side listening with attention gives meaning to all of this work. My name is Gabriel, and my purpose is to guide you in this practice of living with dignity and peace, even when others don't change. Stoicism isn't just an ancient doctrine of wisdom, it's a way to stay steady through uncertain days, to learn to speak with balance, and to care for what we say as a way of caring for who we are. If each of us applied just one of these 7 words in daily life, the world would be a calmer, more humane place. Share in the comments where you're listening from, and write this phrase to seal what we've learned today. My words create peace. It's a simple statement, but it holds the essence of everything we've explored, the choice to speak consciously, knowing that every word is a seed. Share this video with someone who needs to reconnect with their voice or heal a relationship. Thank you for staying until the end and for being part of this community of souls seeking clarity, not perfection. Up next, you'll see 2 videos on screen. Choose one and continue deepening your journey toward wisdom and inner calm.